This is the 2023 Volkswagen Amarok, and unless you've been living under a rock about as big as that one behind me there, you probably know already about the close relationship between this new Amarok and the Ford Ranger. But what if you don't particularly care about that relationship so much? You don't care about the Ranger, you just want to know if this is a good car. In this video review, I want to run you through everything that you need to know about this new Volkswagen Amarok. So I'm going to see how capable it is off-road. I'm going to see how comfortable and refined it is on-road. And I want to do some load testing. This is a four-wheel drive ute after all. And we're going to dig through that interior to see what all the comfort and all the technology is like. But I'm going to set myself a challenge in this review. I'm going to try my absolute best from this point on to not use the word Ford from now. The Volkswagen Amarok PanAmericana is priced from $75,990 plus on-road costs, and that sits it alongside the more expensive Aventura as a top-spec model. That means it gets 18-inch alloy wheels with Goodyear all-terrain tyres and a softer suspension tune. There's a spray-in tub liner in the back, and the interior is also upgraded, with leather upholstery and accents, an 8-speaker sound system, and heated front seats with 10-way electric adjustment for the driver. PanAmericana spec gets a 3-litre turbo diesel V6 which makes 184 kilowatts and 600 newton meters. That runs through a 10-speed automatic gearbox with selectable 4-wheel drive, a low-range transfer case and a locking rear differential. That 600 newton meters makes this Amarok the torquiest V6 out of the mainstream ute segment, matched by the Ford. Does it count if I spell it out like that? In comparison to the old Amarok, this new model is slightly taller but noticeably longer with a longer wheelbase as well. That means the ramp over angle off-road has been slightly reduced to 22 degrees in this new model, but every other off-road measurement is better. There's an 800mm wading depth, 233 mils of claimed ground clearance, a 30-degree approach angle and 26.5-degree departure angle. This is in comparison, by the way, to the old Amarok Canyon, which did have a similar off-road focus to this PanAmericana. So this is the interior of the new Amarok. There is also a top-spec Aventura, but we've got PanAmericana here. It's a little bit more off-road, but in terms of the interior layout, this is still a top-spec experience. It's very nice, and for my money, this feels every bit a Volkswagen. One of the colleagues actually in the office went as far as to say that this smells like a Volkswagen, similar to something you'd smell in a Tiguan or a Golf or a Passat or something like that. Maybe his nose is better than mine because I didn't pick that up originally, but I do like the materials. I do like the layout in here. It looks modern and fresh. We've got a big central portrait style infotainment display here. It's big, it's got lots of features, and obviously in comparison to the old Amarok, this is worlds apart, a lot better. It's bigger, it's faster, it's got a lot more features as well, and I do like that it is fairly easy to use overall in terms of the operating system. Now, it is based upon the system that is used in another make and model four-wheel drive ute. Volkswagen has used that system here, but they have changed it, and they've gone to some effort to change it as well. The graphics are a bit different. The feel of operating it is a little bit different, and I do like the fact that Volkswagen hasn't done what that other company that used to be famous for Falcons, that company, they have used a large portion of this screen here to control climate functions in that popular four-wheel drive ute. They've also got physical buttons further below, but you do have this amount of space that's kind of always used up, which is a little bit of annoying. When you've got so much screen, you can't actually use all of it. Volkswagen, this is a little bit different here. Your climate is buried, like I said, behind a button there, which isn't too bad actually in functionality, but it's a little bit harder to use than others. But you do get full use of the screen, which I do appreciate. You've also got a proper volume dial there, always good to have, and plus some keyboard style buttons here. So one for some parking functions, that climate control button. You've also got driving modes here on the right hand side. You'll be using that a little bit if you go off road and do some different things in this Amarok. And also this one here, that is for your driver assistance controls. So that's all really handy stuff to have just within reach. And in front of the driver, you've got a fully digital instrument cluster in front of you there, and that's got a fair amount of functionality going on. There are some things that I do like. You've got tire pressure monitoring, which is cool. You've also got gearbox temperature monitoring, which is handy if you're going to be going off-road, but especially if you're towing and going to be putting this 10-speed gearbox under a bit of strain. You can keep an eye on it. You can also do engine temperature monitoring, but for some reason you can't see the actual temperature there, but you can see if that engine is getting a little bit hot whilst working hard. Plus there's a whole bunch of other things in there, including navigation, what music you're listening to at the time, and all sorts of things. So that is a good setup. We've got a wireless charging pad there below, and you'll notice here there's this little doodad, I suppose you could call it, sitting in there. Now that is an integrated brake controller, which is pretty cool. If you're going to be doing a lot of towing in this Amarok, that's all set in and ready to go. You can adjust your braking gain up and down there a bit. Takes up a little bit of room, I suppose, if you're going to stick things like wallets in that space there, but I suppose you'll mostly have your phone. There's USB, USB-C, and 12-volt power there as well. You might find a 12-volt power outlet in the center console in some other makes and models, but not in this one. 2 cup holders there, no handbrake. This is an electric handbrake in this setup here. And then you've got this switch here, which controls all of your off-road stuff. But one thing I also want to talk about are the seats in this new Amarok. So coming from the old generation Amarok, I've got to say that it had some of my favorite seats getting around. They were called Ergo Comfort, especially in those high-spec Amaroks. They were fantastic, really comfortable seats, a lot of adjustment. They looked great. Just big favorite of mine. These are a bit different. These are, how do I say this? They're forward seats. Volkswagen have changed the materials, they've changed the foam and that sort of thing, but in terms of the actual structure of the seat and the adjustment available, this is from that other brand that I'm trying not to mention too much. Still, they're a very good seat, they're nice and comfortable. This has a slightly stiffer foam in areas, so it does feel maybe a little bit more bolstered, but it's comfortable, it's got all the right adjustment there, and in this specification they are heated, which is nice on those colder days. We've got some interesting materials here. It's almost like a distressed looking leather stuff here on the top of the center console, and the seats also on the doors. And I do like this little extra glove box here. It's got a nice function to it. It's nicely damped. I could actually sit here all day and open and close that. I think it feels really quality, but overall this does feel like, I guess, the next generation, the next step in terms of four-wheel drive utes becoming more comfortable, more luxurious, more tech laden, and all of that sort of thing. These things used to be simple old runabouts once upon a time, but no more. This is a genuinely nice place to be. With this new generation Amarok, Volkswagen have effectively gone from having the least family suitable four-wheel drive ute in the segment to going to somewhere towards the top of the class. The old Amarok, it was tight, it was fairly confined, it was lacking features, but most importantly, it was lacking those second row airbags. This bad boy has got them now, and it's also got a lot more space overall. This new Amarok is a larger vehicle in comparison to the old one, so you've got more legroom, you've got a little bit more headroom as well maybe, but you've got extra comfort in these seats, I think. The second row isn't as much of a forgotten thing in this new Amarok, I think. You've got air vents there, you've got one single 12-volt power outlet there, no USBs, a couple of map pockets, and you've got the usual array of ISOFIX points for the outboard seats, and a pop-out cup holder, which is a little bit tight to pop, but once you get it, there it goes. There are 2 cup holders there, but this is quite good for a four-wheel drive ute. Still, it's not going to be as nice as a medium or a large SUV for family usage, but this is quite good. And also, you do get some handy storage under the seat of this second row here, which is great. One little point to make, there is the car on which this is based. They have a slightly different setup in terms of where they fit their tyre change equipment. In the Amarok at the moment, it's currently under my bum there, and it does take up a little bit of space. Just one little thing to be aware of, I suppose. Before we hit some of those harder tracks off-road, I thought I'd do a quick little walk around of this Amarok just to see how it looks, because I reckon this is a good looking four-wheel drive ute. It's quite squared off in the front here, and I do like the design. It's not too chromey. You do have a little bit of chrome going on, and I do like these headlights as well. They are a matrix LED headlight, a little bit more performance than usual, although you do get that in the lower specification style as well, so you don't have to spend up if you do want those features. But something that the PanAmericana gets that others don't is this wheel and tyre package. That's an 18-inch black alloy wheel, and you've got a Goodyear all-terrain tyre, which is Not like a full-on hardcore all-terrain, I would say. It's not light truck or anything like that, but it would be an improvement over a more highway biased tyre for off-roading, and we'll see how that goes soon. One thing I'm not so fussed about, I suppose, in terms of off-roading are these side steps. They're a different design to the old Amarok that had that sort of log-shaped chrome tube. That was really prone to damage, that one. This one might be a little bit more flexible, I suppose. We'll see how that goes, but we've got to keep it in mind because generally speaking, with a four-wheel drive ute, that's the first thing you're going to hit when you start pushing things off-road. So we will keep an eye on that. But in terms of overall size, this is a larger vehicle than the previous generation Amarok. The old Amarok was fairly wide in comparison to other utes, but it wasn't as long. And you can see here, the second row is bigger and the tub is bigger as well. I think it sits a bit higher. It's a big, square looking four-wheel drive ute. It's got a lot of presence, I think, but we're going to see off-road if that extra size actually helps out, or maybe it might hamper it, but let's go see. Spent a fair amount of time in this Amarok off-road now in both high speed and low speed situations. I've got to say I'm quite impressed with it. Firstly, on roads like I'm driving at the moment, doing 30, 40 kilometers an hour, on unsealed tracks that are a little bit rocky at times, uneven as well. This car feels really well connected to the road. It's got a nice sense of stability. The suspension in this PanAmericana, just being a little bit softer, I think, yields big benefits in this kind of situation. Just allowing it to absorb the road a little bit more. The steering feels nicely connected and balanced. And I've aired down these tires a little bit as well, so the ride is great. This is one of the much nicer vehicles to drive on high-speed dirt like this. And then when you start to do some low-speed, low-range technical four-wheel driving, this Amarok does continue to impress. Firstly, one thing to talk about is a low-range transfer case. Back in the old Amarok days, if you wanted an automatic gearbox, which, let's face it, everyone does, and you wanted low range, well, too bad, because you got an 8-speed automatic, you got a cool off-road mode that allowed the Amarok to be quite capable, to be honest, but it's still not as good, in my opinion, as a proper low-range transfer case, and I will gladly be dragged off that hill dead because I believe that low-range gearbox is the best thing you can have in a four-wheel drive. And the good news now is this new Amarok has it. It's still got 2 more gears in this gearbox. The old one was an 8-speed, this is now a 10-speed, but they've chosen to use a low-range gearbox. It's got decent gearing, and you've got a locking rear differential as well there, and it just allows the car to feel a little bit more settled. This 10-speed automatic gearbox, one of the benefits of it is that it does have a relatively low first gear as well. So reduction feels to be pretty good, and there's a lot of stability and traction on offer as well. I aired these Goodyear all-terrain tyres down and they offered a surprising amount of grip. Actually, I don't always hold OEM tyres in very high regard. You can easily improve upon them, and I'm sure you can improve upon these ones with some aftermarket tyres, especially in terms of puncture resistance and chip resistance and that sort of thing. But in terms of grip, these were actually really good. We took on some fairly steep tracks there that had some slippery rock. It was hard to walk up and down the track actually, which is always a good indication of how difficult it is. And once aired down, this Amarok just walked up really confidently with a lot of stability. You're able to control the throttle really nicely with this V6. It's got that lazy initial torque. You don't wait for any revs to spool up the turbo or anything like that for meaningful torque. It just does it, and that's really nice. So you can control your speed well in low range. You can see what's going on, and to be honest with you, the first thing you're going to run out of is ground clearance. Something like a Nissan Navara Warrior would be better than this off-road because it's got a bit more clearance. A Ranger Raptor is in another league again, but I've got to say this PanAmericana, in terms of standard fitment four-wheel drive utes, this would be one of the better ones to pick. Putting a four-wheel drive ute through its paces off-road is a great excuse to escape the city and get out into the bush for a couple of days, but we do this for a real purpose. We find this is the best way to really test out a four-wheel drive. Living out of the car, camping and four-wheel driving, just like so many Australian off-road enthusiasts do in their own time. And we do find that this is a better way to test and review four-wheel drives, rather than some basic tests in a proving ground. Going to be a little bit selfish because I love coming out and camping, and doing nights like this out in the bush, but it also gives me a really good opportunity to test these utes quite thoroughly off-road. We can load them up, we can take them off-road, we can do all of those things. And if you enjoy this content, you like what we do and you get something out of it, please give us a thumbs up on the video. And if you're not subscribed, make sure you are, because that really helps us come out here and have a night in the bush. We're packing up camp, but before I throw everything back into the tub of this Amarok, I thought I'd show you around what's going on in the back. This is the PanAmericana model. We do have a few features going on here. One thing I do love, especially when you do stuff like this, is this tub liner here. This isn't a drop-in one, this is a spray-in tub liner, and it's really good quality. I like the way it looks, I like the finish of the tub overall, but also you can throw firewood in the back and you're not going to scratch the paint. It's a really good thing to have if you're actually going to use this four-wheel drive ute. This tailgate is nicely damped as well on the drop down and on the lift up a little bit. Just makes it feel a little bit more premium, I suppose. And we do have 6 tie down points, which is more than the old Amarok. Volkswagen tell us you can still fit a Euro size pallet into the back of this Amarok. Although I've got to say, who actually buys a ute with a tub to put pallets in the back? It's not very functional, but it is a good indication, I suppose, of the width you've got in between the wheel arches there. This is a relatively wide vehicle, just like the old Amarok, but it's also a bit longer and taller as well. One thing I have noticed though is the lack of a 12-volt outlet here. There are some other vehicles, including the other car that I'm not talking about, that have 12-volt outlets. There's a spot for it right here, and I know that there is probably power running to that spot there, or at least it's very easy to run power to it. So maybe for the aftermarket you can fit 12 volts, you can put some gauges and some other things in there probably, but as a standard configuration there isn't any power outlets in this tub, and I do feel like that is a miss, especially for this PanAmericana model. Sports bars on utes do have a habit of getting in the way of loading this thing up, and it's particularly the case here with this Amarok. This bar runs a long way back here and it kind of stops you from reaching over and into the back. But I do like the capping here on top. It means you can load this car up a little bit and not worry so much about scratching the paint. You've got a handy spot here, I'm using it at the moment for a beverage. You've got a ruler on the back there, which is nice. You've also got additional capping here along the top of the tailgate. That is really good. But one other feature I think that is really important in a ute, and not many of them have it actually, is central locking that includes the tailgate. There you go, that is handy. If you're going to throw a roller cover or something on top of this, a hard lid, you can lock this thing up easily just by pressing the button. You don't have to pop your key out or do anything silly like that. I think you'd agree with me that one of the most important things for this new Amarok is that it provides a premium driving experience for the segment, because that's one of the things that the old Amarok did really, really well, even towards the end of its very, very long life cycle. That Amarok was a nice car to drive. It handled well, it handled bumps well, it was nice to drive through the steering and the suspension. Everything worked nicely. And if this new Amarok took a backward step in any of those regards, I think it would be a bit of a fatal flaw for this new model. But the good news is, this is a nice car to drive as well. It's different, it does have a different feel overall, but it does have a lot of refinement on offer for the segment. This isn't going to be as nice as a luxury car or even a really nicely sorted sedan or SUV, but it is, for the segment, one of the nicest riding utes around. It's also one of the most refined and quiet as well. Now we've currently got a 1-ton bulker bag of sand in the back of this Amarok. This is a PanAmericana model and it's got a payload of 1,031 kilos according to the Volkswagen spec sheet. So let's just say we are about bang on total payload at the moment. And I've got to say, while the ride quality of this car is quite good most of the time for a ute, it does start to fall down a bit when you get this big payload in the back. There's no getting around the fact that the bump stops now are in contact with the leaf springs all of the time with this kind of weight in the back here. So if you go over a decent bump, you will feel that thing compress and you'll get a bit of a shudder through the rear there. In terms of the rest of the drivetrain, this V6, it's a peach. It's got so much torque available at low revs. It doesn't really care whether you've got a ton in the back, probably even more in a trailer. It wouldn't be too fussed. I think the gearbox starts to feel a little bit less smooth, almost shuddery at times with a little bit of extra weight on board. You can feel it going about its business more so than when it's unladen, but it's not too bad overall. And things like steering and brakes, they seem to be okay. Of course, I'm driving to the conditions here. I'm not racing around while I've got a ton of sand in the back. It probably wouldn't be a good idea, but overall, the suspension is probably the weak spot of this car when at full payload. When it's not at full payload, it's good, it's comfortable, it's really nice for a ute, but that is the trade-off you've got here. So while this PanAmericana spec might not be the best load lugger in the segment, we did find some great strengths off-road. It feels comfortable, confident, and capable. And although there is a high asking price, you do feel like you are getting a premium ute experience with loads of bells and whistles. The interior and the driving experience both feel very quality, and overall I feel like this Amarok does move the game forward in comparison to the previous generation model. Well, we're out of the bush and we're back in the suburbs, somewhere where this Amarok will no doubt be spending a lot of time, and it's time to wrap up this video as well. I've got to say, overall, I've been quite impressed with this new Amarok. It does cost a pretty penny. You're looking at over 75 grand before on-road costs for what you see here. You can spend more money on Amaroks, sure, and you can spend more money on dual cab utes in other places as well. But I think it's important that this car does deliver in a few key areas. It's comfortable, it's refined. I do like that interior. It's different and it's unique and it feels like a Volkswagen. That's really important. It's capable off-road. I think we figured that out today, but also it's nice to drive on-road. You don't really feel bad about spending hours of time behind the wheel of this car. It's quite enjoyable. But of course, the question on everyone's lips, and I think it's an important one. I'm going to need this jar in a second. Volkswagen has done an important job here because they've made this vehicle look and feel and drive quite different to its twin under the skin. That's right, the Ford Ranger. There we go, I've said it. But it is an important thing that this does feel different. If you look at the relationship between the Isuzu D-Max and the Mazda BT50, this relationship is much different, and that's a very important point to make. And I think they've done a good job overall of making this feel like a next generation Amarok. Now, I'd love you to put a couple of coins in my jar, please. Leave a comment below on this video. Let me know what you think of it. Did you enjoy the video? And of course, what do you think of this new Amarok? Would you choose it, or would you choose something else from the segment? Maybe a Ranger, maybe a Hilux, who knows? And I've got some good news. If you want to see this Amarok head to head against the Ford Ranger, here is a video done right here. And if that's not enough, we've also got another comparison up here. That is the Volkswagen Amarok versus the Toyota Hilux and the Isuzu D-Max. So check out those videos if you want to know more. And as always, make sure you subscribe to Drive on YouTube. Head over to our website for the full review, and thank you for watching.